certainly in the first year. So as I say, we're only just over 6 months in. Just move that on. So tonight I will go through the team's makeup, explore some of the tasks that they've been performing. We'll then look at some specific metrics and propose some more comprehensive satisfaction surveys, identify some potential performance indicators that we can measure against going forwards, and highlight the future development of the team. So taking the first of those, we had 2 rounds of recruitment from about February, March onwards, and the team members began to join us through May and into June. We've got a range of different people from all sorts of backgrounds, and you know, they've been working well together, and you know, beginning to pick up the necessary skills for the tasks. The department, contrary to concerns that I think were previously voiced, we do actually have access to 3 vehicles within the team, 2 electric vans and 1 older diesel, and although they are occasionally used by other members of the wider department, they are 90% of the time they're actually being used by the officers, so they've got no problems getting to the extremes of the borough and doing the patrols that they need to do. They've received some substantial amount of face-to-face and online training in a range of subjects, so they've all now got a good grounding in the skills necessary for the role. They've also been mentored by our existing envirocrime officer, who's got a great breadth of knowledge in the area, and also qualified EHOs and technical officers from within the wider environmental health team. We've been keen to ensure that they spend as much time as possible visible and out on the district, so our existing technical admin back office team within environmental health have been supporting them in things like computer entry and the necessary paperwork, so that the time they spend in the offices is limited. So looking at some of the daily tasks, I've listed some on the slide there. Of note, we've recently joined them up to the Shopwatch radio system, which means that they've got direct contact with Hertsmere's CCTV control centre that covers the county, which means that they can get close cooperation and coordination in terms of unfolding incidents or real-time reaction to problems on the ground. But it also gives them an additional level of safety in the fact that they can be monitored by the CCTV control room if they're out and about on the high street, certainly. In terms of other activities, they've conducted over 320 duty of care visits. This is to business premises to make sure that they're making appropriate arrangements for their waste, and that's one of the leading causes of the urban fly tipping we see. So you know, the fact that they are getting out and speaking to people and you know, looking through what arrangements they've got has been very beneficial. In terms of other successes, they've recently been involved in a PACE interview, that's under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, with a registered waste carrier. Now, we always talk about people making sure that you use registered waste carriers to remove their waste. Unfortunately, in this case, the waste carrier was involved in fly tipping himself. You know, the evidence we found in the fly tip led us to this perpetrator, and he has admitted liability under the caution. So that case will be going to court. But it just shows you that, you know, even using a registered waste carrier doesn't necessarily guarantee that they are doing what they should be doing. We've got a number of other things that they've been involved in terms of working with other agencies. Antisocial Behaviour Awareness Week back in November. They were involved in a special hotspot survey with police colleagues. The Let's Talk ASB Day promotion in Shenley Road, again back in November. And we've also been working with Community Payback Team, organising litter picking on parts of Shenley Road and particularly the rear of shops, and promoting Community Action Day. We've been doing those litter picks around the borough in hotspot areas. Another thing that they've been involved in is Operation Hotspot, which is something that we're working with our colleagues from the police service. It's an initiative funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner, and in Hertsmere, the hotspot area has been identified as Shenley Road and particular times of the evening. So we've managed to receive funding so that the community enforcement officers have been able to undertake evening and weekend patrols, but with this additional funding, to be there and about when hotspots of antisocial behaviour are taking place. We've had some really good positive feedback from businesses and the public about those patrols. So that's probably enough on that one. So moving on to some of the specific metrics, the team have, since they've started, investigated over 250 fly tips. They've travelled over 8,000 miles in the vans. That's patrolling the rural areas and obviously travelling to the more distant parts of the borough, to Bushey and Potters Bar and Radlett and so on. And they'll continue to do that. That's in addition, obviously, to the foot patrols that they're able to do, in Boreham Wood, and obviously when they drive to the other towns, they'll park up and be more visible by doing foot patrols as well. But the vehicles are very useful for the rural inspections of fly tips and so on. It gets them to where they need to be. So as a result of those investigations, we've issued over 30 formal warnings, and they've received, it says 5,900. I think we're well over the 6,000 now, just in the last couple of weeks since I wrote this, in terms of fly tipping, littering and duty of care fixed penalty payments. And there's some more waiting to come through. So that's around 40 FPNs served. And just to put that in context, that's about 4 times the number that we actually served in the previous 12 months before the team were in place. So you can see that the presence of the team has resulted in a much higher level of activity in terms of those FPNs. Further successes include a fly tipper found guilty and sentenced to 200 hours of community service, and we were awarded over £2,000 in costs. That was for 6 counts of fly tipping. Interestingly, that was somebody from outside of the borough, so it's not necessarily our own people that are fly tipping in Hertsmere, it's people from outside. We've had a big increase in the use of the community payback team for clearance of litter and so on. We've been able to focus and identify hotspots where that needs doing, just by the fact that we're patrolling regularly and seeing where problems are occurring. And I've already mentioned the duty of care visits. In terms of the sort of engagement with public and businesses, it's quite difficult to identify every small conversation that they have when they're out and about, but we've certainly, we're looking at least 150 sort of meaningful interactions per month in terms of talking to businesses and members of the public. So the key sort of measures to success we feel was how residents and businesses feel about the team and how they value the new service. We've begun to do some very basic questioning of people, and the responses we've had have been very positive. We've asked people whether they feel that there's been an improvement in their area since regular visits began, and they've all said yes. There's some on the slide. There's some examples of actual feedback that people have given when asked whether they feel that the enforcement officers are a good way of communicating with the council and other agencies, and that's in terms of us being able to signpost them to where help's available. And as you can see, we've had some very positive feedback on that score. Going forwards, we want to develop a more comprehensive customer feedback survey. So we'll be asking the people who conduct the survey whether they're satisfied with the team's performance, whether they're aware of the team's performance, and we're going to ask them to rank in a sort of 1 to 5 some of the topics that the team are currently involved in and could potentially be involved in, just to judge whether we're sort of in the right ballpark. And then obviously there'll be some space for free text comments as well. So we're hoping to start. We'll get those printed out, and the team will be carrying those with them, so to ask people that they interact with to respond. Moving on to performance indicators. Again, we didn't set anything at the beginning because we really didn't know what the team's work was going to end up comprising of, but we're now in a better position to identify some key performance areas and move forward with a proper way of monitoring those, and we will be able to report on those. So some of the suggested ones are there, and I'm very happy to receive feedback from members if they've got any other ideas. But I think the thing to bear in mind is we need to make sure that we've got things that are readily measurable, and things that are reflect actually the service, rather than just the number of times a problem occurs, because that won't necessarily be within our gift to control. We're also obviously monitoring the number of fly tipping incidents, which I mean, obviously that will be monitored. It's already reported to DEFRA. Both our team and teams within Ian's service are involved in the collection of fly tipping and so on. So all of that data already gets collated. So we're very keen to see whether the new team's activities have actually started to put a halt on the increase in fly tipping in the borough. I mean, I'm not suggesting it'll decrease it, but it might halt the rise that we've seen over the last few years. So we'll be putting those metrics into the equation as well. And finally, moving forwards, we're hoping that the team will undertake the police accreditation scheme training. This is something that some of our existing environmental health staff have done, and it's a very useful way of getting good experience on sort of dealing with people out on the street and taking enforcement action. So the team will be going through that in the next few months. That will then increase their competencies to a point where we'll be able to allow them to undertake some enforcement work directly themselves. But obviously the corollary of that is that we need to make sure that they don't end up having to spend a lot of time on the paperwork that's normally associated with taking enforcement action. So we need to make sure that our back office team are able to cope with an increased demand there. We're also looking at the adoption of revised public space protection orders. Now these cover all sorts of open spaces within the borough, including our streets, and parks and so on and so forth, and that will control dog fouling and keeping dogs on leads and that sort of thing. But also some other novel ideas. We're looking at anti-idling, having that as a PSPO, to help on the air quality side as well. And the team will be able to enforce and monitor that. I mentioned earlier boosting the back office capacity just to make sure that the team's workload is smoothed out. So they're collecting lots of evidence on fly tipping, but we need to be able to carry out the enforcement action that's necessary. And finally, looking at the replacement of vehicles. As I say, we've got three. One is getting a little bit long in the tooth, so we've got a program of replacement of vehicles. So we'd probably be replacing that in the next year or 18 months as well. That's all I've got here, but if anybody's now got any questions, I'm happy to field them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Kazar's hand went up first, so go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. Maybe Paul or any other member can answer. First thing is just a technical thing. I just noticed while reading the paper, 5.2 bullet point 1 was 320 daycare visits. The same point has been repeated in bullet point 3, so I'm not sure if it's a typo or is it deliberate. I'm not sure, but just to kind of get your attention onto that bit. In terms of questions, Paul, the one thing that I didn't read, I was kind of curious about, the use of vans. It says, among other things, being used in other activities, such as transport of stray dogs. Do we know how many dogs have been transported since the new forces come into place?
Yeah, well, I think what I was trying to explain is that we already had the vans in the department before the team, and that was one of the things that we had the van for. Within environmental health, we have a responsibility under legislation to sort of pick up, seize technically stray dogs, and then kennel them and try to reunite them with their owners. And that's not something that's done by the community enforcement team, but it is something that's done within the wider environmental protection team within environmental health. So it's something that the team were already doing. If you want metrics on that, I haven't got it off the top of my head. It's not lots, but the thing is, you need, if you do get a stray dog, we do have a performance indicator to say we need to try and collect it within 2 hours. So obviously, if the team were off in all the vans, we need somebody to come back and bring a van so that we can go and do that. So that, we're not asking the enforcement team to collect stray dogs, but we've got specialists within the team that would need to use those vehicles. So but it's not a large thing, but and there's some other tasks that the wider team use the vans for.
So the second question, turning to financials, you said the money received from the fines is roughly about 6,000.
Yeah.
So how much more is outstanding? Because you mentioned in your presentation that what's been mentioned in our papers, obviously that's changed. So how much more is outstanding? And I have a final question, Chair.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that one now? Yeah, I'll do that one. Yes, while I think of it. It is a constantly moving feast. I think that we were when I wrote this, we were at 5,900. I spoke today with the officer, and I think we've had the one that was outstanding paid, which would have been 300. So I think we're up to 6,200 now with those ones. Whether they've served any more since then, I don't think they have, because obviously we're just sort of still getting back into gear after the Christmas period, or the New Year period. there was one that was unpaid, and we are moving towards a prosecution on that one. So that's in addition to the prosecution I mentioned in relation to the chap who's actually a registered carrier. So we've got two prosecutions pending, one for non-payment and one, for where we're going straight for a prosecution because of the severity of that particular case. So in general terms, obviously when you issue a fixed penalty, people are given time to pay it. If they pay it within 14 days, they only need to pay the slightly lower amount. If it runs beyond that, then it goes up, and if it goes beyond that, then we have to consider them for prosecution. So touch wood, we've only had the one out of those 40 odd served has gone down that route. So almost all of them have been paid within, and most of them have been paid within that first period. So from our point of view, the money coming in is less, but at least people are doing it in a timely fashion, which is what we want.
And final question, turning to the future, you said you want to adopt a new public space protection order. Do we have a timeline of when that's going to come in? And second part of that question is, you also mentioned that we'll have monthly coffee mornings starting this month. So do we have any dates in mind, any timelines?
Yes. Okay. So the timeline for the PSPOs, it's quite a laborious process to go through. There has to be quite a substantial amount of public consultation when you bring these in. We're pulling together drafts. We've already done some very light touch consultation with certain key stakeholders. So the parish councils and so on have been sort of spoken with. That was a few months ago now, and they were generally supportive of the idea. But we will need to go on to a broader consultation base for the general public, and bearing in mind that these the predominant PSPO clauses around dogs and dog control, people like the RSPCA and dog pressure groups, if you like, will be interested, and they'll probably be making comment. So that consultation period, once we've actually consolidated what we're going to consult on, will probably be 6 to 8 week period. Then we'll come back and we'll have to go through some probably have to go through cabinet to get final approval, and then probably have to go to full council to be adopted. So we're talking about probably 6 months process from now. I would hope that we'd get them in place by the summer or autumn this year. So that'll be a new thing that the officers can, and by then they will have had their training, so they'll be more geared up to be able to enforce some of this stuff. There was another question, wasn't there? Coffee mornings, yeah. Did I put the date in? Let me see if I've got it in my notes. It's down at 96. And no, sorry, I didn't. We do have dates, and it's towards the end of January, but unfortunately I didn't make a note of it. But I'm happy to ask Alex to add it to the minutes if that's useful.
Sure. Thank you.
I think, was there one more just at the beginning you asked? I missed. Financial. Oh, it was about the 320. Yeah. No, so it's the same thing. I'm not counting it twice. I just mentioned it in two different places. So it wasn't two lots of 320. It was the same thing.
No, it's just that when I read it, it just read as repetitive. That's all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's my mistake because I put it in two different bits.
Councillor Morris, you were next.
Thank you. I'm a little concerned, I suppose, and maybe I would I may be directing my questions at the wrong person. But when the concept of removing the funding for PCSOs and directing it in this direction, what the expectation was that we would be addressing many of the issues in each locality. Number one, this seems to be focusing very much on supplementing the services that you were already providing. But what concerns me greatly is the fact that we've introduced a new system. You've acknowledged that we haven't set any milestones or key indicators. So we've actually got no way, even if they were incorrect, no way of measuring the degree of success that this introduction has had. What I do know for a fact is that the level of shoplifting, for example, in Bushy Heath has significantly increased. I'm receiving regular phone calls from retailers exasperated with the situation as it currently stands. And we have no way at this point of measuring the degree of success or failure that this has made. All we've done is redirect some funding towards a service that you already provided. And I'm not suggesting we're not getting a better service, but what we've actually done is create a problem elsewhere. In the case of Bushy Heath, to my knowledge, I've seen the officers in Bushy Heath once. And I'm not sure, and it may well be, this isn't your, I won't say your problem, but insofar as the way we're directing our resources, I'm not comfortable with the fact that we have redirected funding away from PCSOs to an area that is not addressing the difficulties that we are experiencing, for example, in Bushy Heath. You may well tell me I'm speaking to the wrong person, but maybe some feedback on that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. To be clear, the funding that that started the team off was largely money that was given back by the police for the year that they hadn't actually had any PCSOs in post anyway. So I think the writing was on the wall that they weren't going to and I think the commissioner did acknowledge that they weren't going to recruit any further ones. So the money would have been returned, for subsequent years, and that's why I think the decision was made to try and do something with it ourselves. But in all honesty, prevention of shoplifting is not something that would normally be dealt with by a community enforcement team. We don't have powers of arrest or any of those things that either the police or to some extent PCSOs have. We've got powers. We can give additional powers, which we've talked about in terms of the new training that they'll be getting, but I don't think they can be seen as replacement police staff. They just don't have that within their remit. If there has been an increase in shoplifting in a particular area, that's that's something that needs to be addressed by the police themselves through the I don't know if Ian's got some comment. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, you might need to turn your mic off. So I just wanted to comment on a couple of points. I think Paul's absolutely right. The funding that's being used for the team, it was clear it wasn't actually being utilised for anything. So it's been directed to some purposeful activity rather than just being passed to the police and then passed back to us. When the team was set up, and it was set up based on recommendations from a task group from this committee, there was an active decision not to set hard performance metrics, targets, if you like, because this was very much seen as a trial year and to be able to be responsive to the needs that arose from the community as the team was deployed. That doesn't mean that we haven't been measuring everything, because we have, and Paul's given some of those figures back. So that we have the metrics, but we haven't set targets, and that was a conscious thing. There was a recommendation from the task group, from this committee. I think on the issue of shoplifting and other kind of crime, and now I'm just going to revert back to my previous experience in working in community safety. Typically, the type of offenders we're looking at are prolific offenders who are usually feeding an alcohol or a drug habit. There is a certain amount that can be done by working in partnership with shops and businesses, and and there is a role for the team, which I think Paul's already picked up on, and that's by participating in the Shop Safe radio scheme, and building on those sorts of networks, whereby when a known individual, because tends to be just one or two people can put these sort of things right through, spiking through the roof, is known to be present in the community, then the police can give some advice saying, if you see this particular person, give a call on the radio. But we would need a police lead on that. But that's prolific offender scheme is usually the way in which these sorts of spikes tend to be dealt with.
You got another question?
Well,
A follow-on.
it's linked, because I still can't get my head around the fact, even if milestones and key indicators were a stab in the dark, there's still, what you're actually telling me is we've got no measure of the degree of success, and we're not going to start setting any milestones until we've done at least finished the first year. So if I were to say to you, have we been a success or not? Nobody can tell me whether it has been a success. All we know is we spent whatever money wasn't spent on PCSOs on this new venture, but we actually don't know whether it's had any real benefit. What I do know is whether it is because of a redirection of funding or what, I don't know. But the situation that we are seeing in Bushy Heath is far worse now than it was before. Now, whether it's because there's less PCSOs, but I cannot remember, other than on the one occasion, seeing which the fact that they are in uniform, they are a deterrent. I cannot remember seeing a uniformed officer by this council, one of the wardens, walking through Bushy. I don't know what other parts of Bushy feels, but I have no recollection of ever seeing it. And I have great concern that what we have entered into, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing it, but what we've ended up with, in many respects, a worse service than we had before. That's my personal opinion, and it may well be that it is contrary to worrying about the fly tipping and everything else that goes with it, and you may well be getting great successes there, but I'm not sure it's benefiting the community that I serve particularly well at the moment.
Councillor Georgiou is next.
Thank you, Councillor Ponder, and thank you, Paul, for that presentation. I think we saw some of it previously, but it's really good, and I'm really pleased to see the results of the satisfaction survey. All that glitters isn't gold, but this is definitely worth its weight in gold, and definitely worth every penny I think that we're paying for this service. I appreciate some of the other councillors might disagree, but there are qualitative ways that we can measure this, and I'm really pleased to see that the satisfaction survey is showing that this is really making a difference in some of our areas. The question I wanted to ask was, we've recently had a bit of an issue in one of the local parks in Oakmere with antisocial behaviour. Somebody sadly threw lots of our bins into a nearby lake, and I would like to see perhaps our community enforcement officers being able to kind of lead that investigation, and potentially and also try to just protect our assets that Hertsmere owns and looks after. I was wondering if you felt that we had enough community enforcement officers in the borough to be able to do that as a result of this trial, or if you could see us employing more people, and so that way they can cover later in the evenings, and catch people at times where our current team is too small to be able to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, the short answer is no. You can never have enough of this type of person. And I think to answer Councillor Morris's concerns, bear in mind we do only have 4 officers for the entire borough. They do patrol all parts of both the heath and into the main part of Bushy on a fairly regular basis. I can't say that they're there every day, but they're certainly there at least once or twice a week. But we do have a finite resource, and that we've got a number of high street locations to patrol, and all of the rural areas in terms of the fly tipping and so on. So they are spreading themselves fairly thinly, which is why it's important to have the vehicles that we do have. I mean, I certainly take your point regarding parks. At the moment, the powers and the things that they can do something about in parks are somewhat limited. When we bring in the PSPOs, as the public space protection orders, they will specifically introduce some additional controls on dogs, both in terms of fouling, dogs being kept on leads, dogs being kept out of children's play areas, and those sort of things. So there will be a finite reason for additional patrols in those areas, and I think what that will do is bring with it some of the additional benefits, because of their visibility in the park areas, so people will be mindful of their presence. But with only 4 officers, we can't be everywhere, and if we're going to be looking in parks as well as high street locations and out in the rural community, they're going to be spread even more thinly. So I would certainly be happy to receive funding for additional officers, and make sure that we've got sufficient backup in the back office, so that the work they do is properly processed. But my understanding is that the budgets are tight, so we will need to fight hard to get additional funding and expand the service if possible.
You have a follow-on question?
Yeah, just ideally, what number would you say? Not saying if we had all the money in the world, but just ideally, what would you say would be a reasonable number of community enforcement officers to be able to give a good level of kind of coverage in the borough?
I mean, I think we could certainly have the same number again, and that would be much more. We could pretty much guarantee that every town in the borough would get a daily visit. That would be, I think, in terms of the general public. I'm not sure how many civil enforcement officers we have on the parking service, but
Yeah, I was gonna make the same comment, and actually, I would say 10 that is the ideal, and that's what we have for our also confusingly called CEOs, civil enforcement officers rather than community enforcement officers, traffic wardens in old money. That's the number that we deploy across Hertsmere, and 10 is just a very good number when you are operating a shift system across 7 days a week. Things work out reasonably well. If you have less than that, it's a little bit struggle to put a full roster in place.
Councillor Lambert, you're next.
Actually, I'm just to pick up on this performance indicators. It seems to me that if any organisation that is going to set its performance indicators after it's seen how they're getting on is actually modifying the performance indicators for what they are doing well. I think we need to have an idea of what we're trying to get them to do, set the performance indicators, and then you judge how are you performing against them. The way we're doing it at the moment seems to be we'll set the performance indicators when we know which bits they're doing well. But leave that aside. Paul is lucky you have seen one of these officers. I have not seen one in Radlett at all, or in the villages around. And before you say they're coming quite a few times, the parish council manager emailed me this today and said, it doesn't say in the report here where they're operating in the borough, and he asked that I could ask how many times have they visited the parish and where specifically, because neither has he seen them. And it seems at the very least they ought to be telling the parish council when they're going to be there. That those two bits don't really need a question. What I really would like an answer to is, by how many have the PCOs reduced as a result of the funding being withdrawn? I know it is being said that we got the money back in previous years because they didn't manage to recruit all the PCSOs, but we are now down on PCSOs in Radlett and Aldenham West. And so I really would like, I mean, probably can't do it now, but a historical record of how many PCSOs there are usually and how many they propose to have in the future, bearing in mind they've had some of their funding cut off. And that's really important, I think.
Can I just say, is it possible to come back sort of by email on that, because it's not really an update on what we're discussing?
We're happy to get. I mean, it's not something that necessarily Ian or I have specific information at our fingertips. Probably Lauren Kingston or somebody in her team would have that information. All I would say is my understanding was that there's a per capita number of PCSOs that the police commissioner expects, and then there was an additional number that Hertsmere were funding, and the reality was that for at least 2 years prior to us withdrawing the funding, that those were not employed. But equally, some of the police commissioner's own ones were vacant as well.
I've heard this. I really would like to see the figures to back it up, because it's a mythology. Because 2 years ago at operations reviews, we tended to get an indication of which PCSOs were funded by Hertsmere Borough Council and which ones were funded by the police. So we were at one time having PCSOs on the beat funded by us. It may not have happened in those 2 years when they had trouble recruiting, but that's really what I would like to get to the bottom of. So if that could be quantified and have an answer to that, that would be really good.
Yeah, through you, Chair. We'll ask the police to provide that data, because it is a police staffing issue. I mean, the short answer to the question is how many less are there as a result of this is none, because we didn't have any from the funding when we introduced the scheme. But we can get the police to confirm their staffing figures over the past 4 years.
Thank you. And the other is the dog vehicle. Is that the old one that's going to be replaced, or the new electric one?
The old diesel vehicle was designated as a dog van, and it's caged accordingly. But what we do have is we have removable cages that can go into the electric vans as well. One of the issues we have is that as a result of the low emission zone, the ultra low emission zone, we can't take the diesel van, into the outside of the borough on the Barnet side. Unfortunately, our dog kennels are in that area, so we have to swap into the electric van if we take dogs to kennels. So it's not an ideal situation. As I say, that's one of the reasons I'm keen to swap out and get an all electric fleet. I mean, apart from the the green credentials of doing that as an environmental health department, you'd think we would be leading on that. And as far as I know, they are actually the only 2 electric vehicles we've currently got in the council. So we're in the right direction.
Good. My other question is, I live in, well, no, I represent the ward, Aldenham West, which is, other than Shenley, the most rural of all the wards in Hertsmere. And so fly tipping is a real problem, and lorry loads of fly tipping rather than litter. And what has always driven us wild is when there's a fly tip and the fly tippers have been a bit careless and just thrown it everywhere. We don't know whether it's on the road or the verge, and who owns the verge, and is it the landowner? And being sent around trying to report something and then being told it's the landowner is really a bit of a pain. Are our enforcement officers doing that work and making sure that the landowner or Herts County Council or the Borough Council is picking up responsibility? That's the one that drives us wild, those of us who are reporting litter or fly tipping in the rural wards find.
Yeah, well, they're certainly involved in that process. The benefit of having the enforcement officers out and about and in their vehicles is that they can go and look at fly tips very promptly, assess whether there's any evidence in there that would lead to a perpetrator, and if there isn't, then pass the information on quickly to either Ian's team for collection if it happens to be in an area that they can do it, or contact the landowner if it's going to be their responsibility. So they can certainly triage those problems. There is still demarcation disputes. There's always going to be those, but I think the fact that we've got extra people out there that can actually look at it physically, take detailed photos of locations, it does certainly make that triaging of who's dealing with it more easy. But then they're not out there physically picking it out themselves. They're looking for evidence and then reporting it as necessary. So that's their key role when they're out and about looking at fly tipping. Thank you.
So I just wanted to come in on that point, if I may, Chair, because I'm going to unequivocally sing the praises of the team around this issue. It has made a substantial difference in the quality of our response, in the speed of which we respond to fly tipping, in the extent to which we are able to be joined up across processes, and not just within the council, but also liaising with the police, liaising with the county council, and liaising with private landowners. And just that extra capacity is enabling us to do so much more. I mean, this is a big challenge, and one particular initiative won't solve the challenge, but it is making Hertsmere a less attractive place to fly tip in, and I think that's probably what it needs to be, where our ambition is, because to say we'll actually eradicate it is tricky. But to give you a real example, fairly recently, there was a very large fly tip in Holmes Hill Lane, to the extent that it blocked the road. The first team to come across it was Paul's team. They've reported it to the police, they've reported to the county council, they've inspected it for evidence, and that's all been done within a couple of hours of the working day starting, and the road has then been cleared by the county council, because they deal with the carriageways. But this has made a huge difference. And then the advice and skills that Paul's envirocrime officer can put around that process is also fantastic. So we can and do refer private landowners into grant funding opportunities to help target harden their premises. We have agreements in place with landowners where we can put cameras on their land, so our cameras can be a little bit more out of sight. We still signpost when we put cameras because that's the law. And we also have had far greater access to community payback, which is the probation scheme where offenders on licence, like the gentleman we caught who has now got to do 200 hours of community service, have to do some works, and we have got a series of litter picking and clearance projects that they engage with, clearing some of the service roads which are not owned in anybody's ownership, etc. So I think this is an incredibly helpful resource that has made a real difference. And you think your inbox has a lot of stuff in it about fly tipping. Mine's got enormous amounts. I am now able to give a much better response to residents on the issue, that I know that things will be dealt with and followed up speedily. And I've seen some of my kind of very frequent correspondents express significant satisfaction with the work of the team. So.
Did you have one last question? One last question.
And they're pedant ones, actually. We must take care that we say, when we talk about dogs being under lead, is actually dogs being under control. It is not, there is not a requirement in a public right of way to have a dog on a lead. There is a responsibility to have it under control. If that means having it on a lead, so be it. But I do think we have to be a bit careful about that, because it does depend on how well behaved your dogs are. And the only one is that we keep on referring to this satisfaction survey, or has been referred to a couple of times. I think 3 positive quotes doesn't represent a satisfaction survey. I think it might indicate that some people are quite satisfied. I don't think that outweighs the number of people who are dissatisfied with litter, fly tipping, and the like. And I think you are going to have to still work quite hard with me to persuade me that these enforcement officers are going to be as good as PCSOs. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond to that? Just for clarification, Councillor, we haven't embarked on the main customer satisfaction survey yet, and that was why I suggested some questions that were in the slides and are in the report. The quotes were literally just one particular area where we've been focusing, and that was the feedback we had just from a number of shopkeepers we spoke to. So that's not the main piece. That was just a taster of the sort of feedback that we've been getting just when we've been out talking to people. So I just wanted to say that there will be a much more substantial report on the full customer satisfaction survey when we embark on it in the next few months. Thank you, Ken.
Sorry, I wanted to make a slightly pedantic point about dogs, and I agree with you in the main, but there are some areas where we state that we do not want dogs, and so children's playgrounds within parks would be a particular example. And we have had some rather unpleasant dog attacks in the borough, so it is an issue that we take very seriously. And I am also a dog owner, so I'll declare that interest.
I believe the final questions from Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you, Councillor Ponder, and thank you very much, Paul, for your report. Really interesting. Just while you were talking there, I got up the dashboard of the crime figures for the last year, or reported crimes for the last year, and actually across the borough they've remained fairly static, so they haven't gone up or they haven't gone down. And I've had this conversation quite regularly with a few residents about this, and I think sometimes there's a perception, and I'm not saying that they haven't had shoplifting, mine's been more on antisocial behaviour in North Bushy. Sometimes these things are not getting reported because people think that nothing will happen. So I think for me, going out and encouraging people to report to the police, however minor they think it is. But what I will do is, because I'm going to a community safety meeting on Thursday, I will raise directly for you Bushy Heath and the issues around that, and whether or not we can get some more police presence around the area. Okay, so that wasn't my question, but I thought I would just say that. You answered my question already about the fixed penalty notices, so that's good. Anti-idling, I'm really interested in that, because of my past life as a teacher, we do find that's a real problem outside schools. Will that be, how will you decide? Will you look at the air quality in certain areas, or will you start off perhaps targeting schools, because it's a huge problem outside schools, and it really makes it quite unpleasant for families going in and out?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're looking at. I think what we'd probably be doing is looking at what other authorities have done in terms of creating a PSPO around that area. I mean, there is an argument to say that we can have a blanket one that basically says, you know, if you're parked at the side of the road, and you're not, you know, you're not likely to be moving on or moving off, you know, for any length, you know, in any length of time, you know, you should turn your engine off. Obviously, a lot of modern cars, hybrids and so on, will automatically do that. They'll do it when you pull up at the traffic lights or whatever. More traditional cars, and particularly vans and HGVs and so on, it's a different matter. Now, sometimes we get argument, you know, well, I've got to keep the motor running because I've got a chiller unit or something like that. And that's a slightly different thing, and you wouldn't expect many HGVs to be parking outside schools anyway. But we're going to have to just look in detail at the sort of legal what we're allowed to do. But my understanding is that some boroughs have done a blanket one. Other ones have identified, you know, within certain yardage of schools or something like that. I think the more complicated you make it, the more difficult it will be to actually enforce. So, you know, sometimes a borough-wide blanket one will be the way to go. I mean, obviously, it's not something that can be 100% enforced with our four enforcement officers, but the idea is that it will move towards changing public perception about engine idling, and you know, some of the campaigns that we have already run around schools, you know, with the county council, have already done that, and you know, trying to encourage schools themselves, you know, to take that on board, you know, and you know, through assemblies and so on, to send the word home, because it's you know, 90% of the time it's the parents dropping off or collecting that are sitting there with their engines idling. You know, it's just about trying to improve that. But if we've got that backed up with a public space protection order, it just means, you know, we've got something else in the armory, and you know, if people say, well, you know, it's nothing to do with you, say, well, actually it is, you know, we've got this legislation that we can actually serve you a fixed penalty notice for this offence. So that's the idea. So that, and that'll be part of this public consultation. You know, we'll say, we'll put out some ideas. We'll say, you know, we're thinking about doing one for this. What do people think about that? I mean, if you look at other boroughs, people who use this public space protection order regime for a whole range of different things that are occurring particular to their borough. And if I start listing them, everybody will say, oh yeah, that's a good idea, let's have that. But you've got to be able to demonstrate that those things are causing problems at the moment. So for example, cars being driven in a sort of antisocial way, you know, doing donuts in car parks and things like that. You know, there's some boroughs that have got that covered on a PSPO. Now, unless we've got, you know, lots of evidence of that happening regularly, it wouldn't be appropriate to set a you know, a control over something that's not there. The other thing with the PSPOs is that they have to be refreshed every 3 years. So if you put one out and then you'd never get any problems with that, when it comes to 3 years' time, you've got to say, well, is it because there wasn't a problem in the first place, or is it because the controls are there and they're stopping people doing it? So it's quite it's an interesting sort of concept, and you know, the government obviously wanted to give some flexibility, But what it also means is that, you know, if they're so successful that you never have a problem again, it's difficult to keep them in place because there's no evidence to say you need them.
Just one other quick question, if I may. Will the or are they already carrying and have been trained to use naloxone? Do you know?
They haven't at the moment. I know some council staff have, and it's something that I'll be raising with through Lauren probably, to see if it's something that we can do. But yes, it's a very good point. Thank you.
Okay, we've been over an hour on this particular item, so I'm going to say that propose that we, as a committee, note this report. So,
Mr. Chairman, I object. I don't note the report. I've put my hand up a considerable time ago, and I've got a number of questions I would like to put forward, and I would like to.
Apologies, I didn't actually see you have your hand up, but you did say.
I think I did, and I think your clerk has it written down in front
Yeah,
of you.
apologies. So I will let you ask some questions in that
Right,
case.
colleagues, the first thing I see here, and I've listened very carefully to the discussion, it's very, very interesting. Community enforcement team update, it says. Well, it is an update. It's an enforcement update. It's an environment update. So shouldn't we be calling these enforcement officers environment enforcement officers? And I propose that, and I throw it into the table. If I have to, I will do it at full council as well. I'm sure Jeremy is there listening to me very carefully down there. I think that the word community is confusing us all. Environment won't confuse us because that's what they do. They enforce the environment. Now, moving on to that, can I say that 30 formal warnings, 39 fixed penalty notices, that's very good. But why are we giving informal warnings? You know, the reality is these people have broken the regulations. So therefore, we should issue them with a penalty. And there shouldn't be any informal warnings or any formal warnings. We should go straight to the penalties. Fixed penalties. There we are. Now, in relation to the, if I can now talk about the indicators, these are all environmental indicators. As we've already said before, they're nothing to do with the police force or anything else. These are environmental indicators. That's why I believe we should be going back to that word, environment enforcement officers. But can I say, it says here, one of the daily tasks, and it says daily tasks further up the report, it says is to let me just get it here. Daily tasks highlighted, visibly patrol in towns and villages. And it's on 2 pages in your report, actually. It was in the, and they're not visiting the areas daily. Now we know that because you've admitted it, and you know, because we don't have enough of them, which is fair enough. We might need more, you know, which is nothing wrong. I mean, you know, I'm all for more. More is great. But one of the things I'm thinking here is, why aren't we reporting this in a proper, meaningful way? We put down here the suggested performance indicators are patrols carried out, number per year. Now, you've already in the report said they should be wandering around daily. Now we're talking about yearly in the indicators. That's going to totally throw it out. We should have it patrols carried out per quarter in each area, so we can meaningfully know where these people are. Now, it is complicated, I agree, because a lot of their work is back office work, which I would imagine they get their people phone in, they complain about the fly tipping, and you know, you've got a big back office staff dealing with that. But we have to somehow measure what they do, and the only way of doing it is finding out where they are. So I will be wanting to see in a future performance indicator something which shows clearly where their time is spent, so we can analyse it and then decide whether it's value for money, because that's what we're all here to achieve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Reply.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, as I said when I was presenting that part, these are some suggested performance indicators. The per year is just a per year can be reported on a quarterly basis. It's still the same metric. It's just how much you break it down. Certainly, were keen to identify specific areas so that everybody can see that they are covering all of the borough. I mean, in answer to your comment about the fact that they're not necessarily getting to every high street in the borough on a daily basis, clearly not. But they are patrolling high streets across the borough daily. That doesn't mean to say everyone every day. I'm talking about every day they are patrolling high streets. So it's a matter of semantics, I think, between us. I'll say no more on that one.
What about the name?
The name was discussed at the task and finish group, and the name that was agreed finally has been agreed by all concerned. If you want to put forward an alternative name, then we can consider that. But I mean, the whole point of the use of the word community was that apart from the enforcement work they do, the secondary part was that public perception of there being somebody out there that they could speak with, and that's why I think the word community was favoured.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I've already proposed.
No, I'm just going to jump in for a second. That we have had a community enforcement service update, not a name update. So I think we should just leave it there now, if everyone's happy to, and move forward with a note in this update. Yep. All right. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on with agenda item 6, which is the quarterly procurement update for quarter 3, 2024 to 2025. And this will be presented by Ian Kershaw.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I must give apologies for Kirsten Brown, our procurement manager, who would normally be here for this quarterly update and is unable to for personal reasons. The report that you've got before you is a quarterly update. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because I think you're fairly familiar with it, but there are 3 recommendations: to note the current status of the procurement strategy action plan, note ongoing and upcoming procurements, and to note new legislation which is coming into effect. So just quickly to talk about the first of those, the procurement strategy action plan set out page 26 of the agenda. And I think the kind of key point is that this is up to date and on track in respect of new legislation. There's a significant amount of training that's gone on across the council, and probably note particularly the introduction of the social value portal, which is a way of putting value on those non-monetary aspects that contractors can bring to account, be that local employment, carbon reduction, etc., those types of things. I will rattle on to the second section, which is current procurements, and to note within there, firstly, most of these are actually procurements which my service is carrying out, so I can go into more detail if you wish. The upgrade of parking machine payment options, we've moved from pre-market engagement and are preparing a delegated report for award for that. The income management solution, apologies, I can't comment on that one. I would like to just note where it says multiple recycling facility, that should say material recycling facility. That's where that's the disposal site for where the contents of your brown bin goes. And we are running a joint procurement with North and East Herts councils on that. That doesn't mean we will have a joint outcome. It's being done in lots per council. What we're doing by working with them is saving significantly on the very complex letting of that contract, specifications, tenders, and I will be collaborating with them on the evaluation, so it helps in that regard. And the splash park, I'm pleased to say the tender ran over the Christmas period, and we are preparing a report for award on that. Lastly, there is a section on the Procurement Act 2023. Principally, what this will achieve, or the aims of it are to provide a simpler procurement process that is more transparent throughout the contract life. And so that means as contracts may be varied, etc., there's an obligation on us as the council to post notices to explain that variation. So we can't award a contract which looks like one thing and ends up being another. Not that we would ever do that, but that's what this is aimed at. It's also states that the intention is to open up for smaller businesses and social enterprises, make their ability to win public procurement contracts easier. I guess we will see whether smaller businesses and social enterprises agree that's the case. There is certainly more information and more accessible information for them in the public domain on this now. I think that's what I'll pause there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Lambert, you have a question.
Just going to the current procurements, you've got the multiple recycling facility. It's a joint contract with North and East Herts, which is about as far away as you can get in Hertfordshire. And it always struck me that having to transport stuff a long way is not particularly environmentally good. Why are we trying to set up a partnership with North and East Herts, or is there not somewhere nearer that we can go for recycling?
Yeah, this is not that we anticipate a partnership with those authorities. This is a joint procurement exercise. So we're going to the market with them at the same time, but that tender is in lots. So and you may be aware that North and East Herts actually procure their waste services jointly. So lot 1 is for North and East Herts, lot 2 is for Hertsmere. And by going to the market together, it just means that it's easier for bidders. So we should get more people interested in that. And it's also actually easier for me and my colleagues in North and East Herts, because we can share the workload, and it's pretty extensive. The contract documentation for this is thick.
So the fact it's joint doesn't mean they're both going to go to the same place in the end. Okay.
No, the bidders will be able to bid for one or both lots. It's up to them. But you're absolutely right. Proximity is a key factor in this, and that will absolutely be an aspect which is taken into account in the evaluation of the bids that come through. We want our waste to travel as short a distance as possible. One, because it's cheaper if that's the case. Two, all those heavy vehicles produce a lot of carbon, and we don't want to add to that footprint.
Councillor Kazar.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the Procurement Act that's coming into force, how compliant are we in terms of, could you offer a percentage of how compliant we are, or is there any more work left to be compliant with the new Act?
So I'm going to say that we are match fit. We've had extensive training within the authority from the procurement team at the senior management level and at managerial contract award level. There was a presentation for members back last summer. We have delayed slightly because the government delayed the implementation. So I'm saying match fit. Kirsten will give you the absolute detail of any further refinements the government has made, but I don't actually see anything that's changed in terms of our responsibilities and our readiness for this legislation as a result of that delay. I think it's other parts of the legislation that's been affected.
Councillor Quilty.
It'll come as no surprise that I'm going to mention Splash Park refurbishment, as we know, and I think it's fair to say that splash parks have been a difficult journey in Bushy and a very expensive one for whatever reason, and the last one didn't last too long. So I'm wondering, have we built into this particular tender sort of flexibility so that we can recover any financial monies that are required to fix a broken splash park in the event that it doesn't work?
So the tender for the splash park is for the refurbishment of the splash park in King George's Wreck in Bushy. I think that was originally a paddling pool that was converted to a splash park, and therein lay the problems. It was probably a good idea to try and do that at the time, but the technology around these installations has improved dramatically. And I think the paddling pool, even prior to it being Splash Park, had a history of problems. So what we have, we are finalising the procurement of is a refurb of that, and that is based on a detailed report on what the failings of that park is. You will recall we did a consultation running through the summer where we asked residents what did they want to see improved in the park, and specifically in terms of the splash park, did they want to scrap it, fix it, or put in a new fancy one in brief, and they went for fix it. And so this is what we're doing, but that is on the basis of a detailed report. And if for any reason the procurement doesn't deliver that, then it won't be fit for purpose, and we'll be holding the contractor back to account for delivering that. But I'm confident that it will be fit for purpose. It's based on our insight into the delivery of the splash park in Meadow Park, and whilst one in Bushy was having problems because it wasn't able to cope with high volume and hot weather, which is kind of unfortunate because that's exactly what you want a splash park to do, the one in Meadow Park operated smoothly.
Thank you for that. You've reassured me that in the event that it doesn't work, you will ensure that there's a clause in here that we get our money back, because I think the residents of Bushy are quite annoyed the fact that it was there and the whole summer it was closed down. So you can see it's quite high feeling.
I am fully aware of the strength of feeling when the splash park fails.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Georgiou.
I just wanted to ask about the upgrade of parking machine payment options. There are some issues around things like using QR codes in order to take members of the public to sites to make payments, where people may swap out those QR codes for a QR code that takes them to a legitimate site or something like that. How are we going to ensure that if we are using some kind of digital method in order to allow people to pay, that we are ensuring that those methods are robust and secure in a way that makes it perhaps still possible that somebody could spoof them, but makes it much more difficult for them to do so.
Yeah, and it's worth highlighting that these sort of scams are around, and we have them, unfortunately, with our current machinery. So our civil enforcement officers are alert to the risk, and typically the scam will arise where somebody will put a barcode or a QR code by our payment to suggest that that's the appropriate one, and it will take the unfortunate customer off to the wrong site. Now, so my team know that that's a risk, and they will take these things. They're actively looking for them. They'll take these things down whenever they see them. The new machinery will help in a way, because at the moment, if you arrive to pay, you have an option of cash or pay by phone. So you have a website. If you don't have cash on you, you have the website. Under the new machines, we won't have cash. You can pay by credit card, tap and go, or pay by phone. So you can use the machinery. Whatever device we use, there is always going to be somebody who is trying to take advantage of that. And I think we have had some issues noted where some more elderly residents have been targeted just for theft. So that will happen with cash. With credit cards, again, there are people who can find ways of exploiting the use of those. So the addition of the new machines will reduce the prospect of the go to a different website, but they won't eliminate it. We will have to have controls around security of credit cards as well. We will do that because we are procuring the industry standard, and we I can't say who we're awarding to, but we will be awarding to an absolutely credible supplier whose credentials in respect of online safety are up to snuff.
Do you have a follow-up?
Would it be possible to have any information around any of the losses that we've had over the past few years whilst using cash machines? I understand that sometimes cash machines have been broken into and money's been stolen and things like that, and therefore we could then compare that with any issues that we've had once we've moved over to a card-based system and see if the new system is, as I said, it may not necessarily be totally invaluable, but is actually providing us better security than the existing system we were using.
Through you, Chair, absolutely we can. I would note the principal reason for moving away from cash machines is finding a contractor who will service a cash machine and the parts for cash machine, as well as that's not what our customers are saying they want. Over 70% of our customers are using pay by phone. That's the preferred method of payment.
Councillor Morris.
For those for those older customers, older councillors, we had instances of vacuum cleaners being used to take the coins out of the machines. So it is an old problem that we're having to continue to contend with. Just a question regarding people being misdirected by the QR code. Obviously, we can't stop people attempting to do that, but do we pursue where we become aware of it, the companies that are actually taking the money instead of ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that's a matter for the police. Often it's quite difficult to do that because they are often not hosted in the UK. So we would absolutely urge the police whenever we're reporting these to follow up, but it's not as easy as it might appear. But absolutely, we will always pursue anyone who is committing offence to the extent to which we are able.
Any further questions? No. Well, in that case, I'll propose that the committee notes the update as per recommendations 1, 2 and 3. Brilliant, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the Council Forward Planning Programme and Committee Work Programme. To note, the committee work programme and council forward plan and identify any possible issues for scrutiny or consider the requirements for officer and or portfolio holder attendance. Does anyone have any questions regarding that at all? No? In that case, the committee will note that updated report.
Ask something about reports that we saw for a peer review. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this at this stage, but there was a criticism of a peer review in relation of this committee. I wonder if you've got anything to say at this moment in time as you chaired the meetings, and the peer review was fairly critical of this committee.
I would have to advise, Chair, at the moment that's not a matter which is on the agenda. I don't think it's something that we can get into any particular.
I'm just saying that we need to, I think we need to look at it and balance it back, or have an item on the agenda to discuss it.
I can happy to speak to you outside of the meeting. I don't quite recognise the description that you've given, so we can maybe we'll have a conversation and unpick that.
I'll move on to agenda item 8, which is any other business that the chair considers urgent, and I confirm there's no urgent business. Agenda item 9, dates for future meetings. The next meeting of this committee is scheduled to take place at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the 18th of March. There is a budget scrutiny meeting taking place at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the 21st of January. So that's next Tuesday. For the operation review committee members are encouraged to attend and will be invited to ask questions. Both of the above meetings I've just mentioned will be held here at the Civic Offices in Bournemouth. And I can confirm I can close this meeting at 20:28. Thank you very much.